The wind is so strong out today and the weather is so warm that it's blown all the icicles sideways, and it's just really funny to me. Hello everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel, or thanks for joining us if you're new here. So this is my third book review in my Canada Read series that I'm going to be diving into today, and today's book that we are talking about is Hench by Natalie Zena Walschatz. I believe I said that right. And it is being defended by Paul's son, Kyung Lee, who is the lead actor from Kim's Convenience. If you watch that show, if you haven't, check it out. It's a good Canadian sitcom. The premise of this book is Hench is a novel about Anna, a woman who pays the bills by doing administrative work for villains. But when an incident involving the world's most popular superhero leaves her injured and gets her fired, Anna realizes what happened to her isn't unique, and she might have the means to take down the so-called hero who hurt her. How? With every office worker's secret weapon: data. Can we just appreciate how good of a write-up that is for a couple seconds? Because, moi. Magnifique. So to dive into the plot of this a little bit more, yes, so this takes place in a world where superheroes and supervillains exist. Essentially, I think kids are kind of like tested at a young age to see if they have powers, and of course in the world of corporate capitalism, these superheroes and supervillains kind of have these big like bureaucratic entities that help support them, and people who are often just struggling to make ends meet, like Anna, end up working as henches for supervillains. So this is just kind of a job that you can get at a contract temp agency, and of course they don't treat you very great, which ends up resulting in her accident. So from there, she gets the opportunity to work for this bigwig villain guy and start to try and like take down and break down the processes of the superheroes. It's all about whether or not there really is like a good or an evil, and really kind of taking things down from the inside. It's nerdy, it's funny, there's so much going on, and I just really love the story and what it brings to it. To dive into characters, I'm just going to touch on some of the big characters that really mean a lot to me. I didn't take notes, so I might not have names for you on some of these, but I promise the last two books I was smart enough and I actually did my job and made notes, so we're learning. So yes, Anna has a lot of spunk and fire to her, which I love. It's really good to just see the way that she kind of takes this rage and is able to kind of like fuel it into something, but there's also like another layer to her where you can tell that her work and all of this is a way of deflecting the things that have actually really hurt her. She very much is like, you knocked me down without my permission, and she doesn't want to give them that ability to do so again. So she's trying to make herself not into the victim, which I think is a very interesting narrative, kind of this story around what it means to be like made into a victim and to have stories told to you from different perspectives, because she's having people tell her, oh, that's not what really happened, to kind of like brush it under the rug, and then also recognizing that even if she wishes this never happened to her, it is a very pivotal thing that occurred in her life, and she's different because of the lasting impacts of her injury that she's going to carry with her forever. One of the other characters that I love is Anna's new boss, Leviathan. He's very kind of like creepy and eerie, and there's like something odd about him that you're trying to figure out throughout the entire book. He wears this like kind of like suit that makes him look kind of like buggish, and Anna's always trying to like tease something apart. There's also this like interesting tension or dynamic between them that I won't dive into much more, but that's something else that the book explores. Now the other character, whose name I can't remember, and it's gonna piss me off, but he is the head of the, I guess the meat is what they call them, which is kind of like the bodyguard type people. And he's just so caring and so genuinely supportive of Anna. He doesn't really like her at first, but then she makes him warm up to her. And he really just takes the time to always check in with her and be honest and blunt, and I think it's really important to have those people that are just going to sit you down sometimes and be like, you might not want to hear it, but this is what is happening in the world. And I really appreciate it that he might always not like what Anna's doing, but he always has her back, no matter what. Alright, what I liked about this book. One thing I loved about this book is casual queer representation, because as much as it's super important to have narratives that focus very much on different aspects of queer identities within the LGBTQIA+ community, it is also equally important to just have queer characters. So the fact that there are multiple characters in this book that use they them pronouns, and that is just the way that they refer to in the book, no big explanation, doesn't need any of that, it's just who they are and part of their identity. Amazing. One of the characters just like casually talking about his ex-husband. Love it. I mean, it's unfortunate the relationship fell apart, but you know what I mean? And just understanding the fact that they're just people, and it's just like dropped in there, and it just makes my little heart so happy every time that I read a book that just does it well. And I feel like that's one part of diversity that sometimes gets brushed aside. It's like sometimes we just need stories about people being people. It doesn't always have to be about like the trials and tribulations of what it means to be a member of that particular community. Other things I love about this book is I am just a sucker for like any good superhero villain like playing with the lines of good and evil story. And this book does it in very much of like our modern world, looking at the ways of like, you know, there's jokes about, well, is like, they don't use the name Amazon, but basically, is working for like Jeff Bezos any different? You know, sometimes just to get by, it's so hard to like find moral rights and wrongs, which like makes me think of like The Good Place. It makes me think of like works by Alan Moore, and it's just, oh, I love it. I love books that like take a narrative that's become so black and white throughout time, like the idea of like bad guy, good guy, and then they complicate it. You know, you're following essentially who you've been told are the bad guys for this book, and it's this idea of, are they really the bad guys? Like, is that really what's happening? And like, let's talk about that throughout the story. Things that I didn't like about this book, the ending. I struggle with how I feel about the ending. I won't get into it, obviously, because I'm keeping these book reviews spoiler-free, but I wanted a little bit more. I think that's kind of where I felt like the book wrapped up Anna's story, but I wanted more of the characters around her, and I know that the story very much focused on her, but I just wished I could have got like a little bit more in some of the other characters' heads, so I would have felt more, I guess, complete, or like got a little bit more sense of closure at the end of the book. And I know every story doesn't have to end that way, but it felt like there was something missing at the end, and I'm not quite sure how I felt about the way that all those loose strands were tied up. That was kind of the only thing that left something to be desired for me. Writing. The writing in the story is very good. There is a couple quotes that I kind of jotted down, just ways of which they explain things that are really interesting, and I feel like part of the benefit of the writing is the complexity of the narrative and those kind of moral ethical implications. I think some of the insight that some of the characters provide really show the author's strength in writing, and it really communicates that and kind of leaves the reader thinking, which I think is always a good thing. You don't always have to think about a book, like sometimes books can just be fun and be enjoyable, but I do think that this book leaves you with something while also being fun and enjoyable, which is a really great combination. Last thing, how well it transports us. I feel like this book is one of the ones that does the best job of transporting us. As I talked about with The Midnight Bargain, it's very much like fantasy and realism, and this book is very much, I guess I call it like a little bit more sci-fi and realism. So it takes us to a world that's not that much unlike our own, but it like implants superheroes and supervillains into it very much in the same way that like the MCU or the Amazon series The Boys does. I love that I'm like, normally in my other videos I'm not talking about outside things, and this one I'm framing everything in like everything I've ever read or watched, so I'm sorry if that's confusing. I can fix it. But yes, kind of in the same way that those worlds do the same thing by grounding it in a version of reality that we understand. And I think because of that, the book does a really good job of transporting us to another world, to like getting really involved in these battles between good and evil and getting delved into them while still existing in a version of reality that when we pull out from the story, there's that like little kernel of thought or questioning or ideology that we can apply to the here and now, and I think that's something that the book does a really good job of. So yes, I would definitely say this is one of the better books throughout the series that does a really good job of answering that question of transporting us. That's all that I have to say about Hench. If you've read it, please leave me your thoughts down below. And yeah, I'm a little tired from all these videos, but I'm really enjoying getting to talk about all of them and getting excited for the Canada Reads debate that's coming out next week. Feel free to let me know your predictions, suggestions, things you liked about these books, things you liked about others, anything else in the comments down below. Make sure that you subscribe and ring that bell so you get notifications when my next 2 videos are coming out. Tomorrow will be 2 Trees Make a Forest, and then Saturday will be Butter Honey Pig Bread. So we'll be ending on my favorite of the 5 books. Otherwise, my Goodreads and my art Instagram will be linked down below, and I will see you all tomorrow for another one of these.